The 2017 season saw Ferrari return to a title fight unseen since 2012. Ferrari had invested significant resources and designed a competitive car for the campaign, but 3 critical errors eliminated their chances of returning to the top. The Tifosi are renowned for their relentless nature. They are a devoted fan base, quickly idolizing you when you perform well. But if you do poorly, criticism rains down, they question your work and start calling for the heads of those responsible. Vettel stated that he didn't wish to criticize the unreliability that marred his 2017 season. He chose to protect his team. He preferred them united because he knew that in 2018 it would mean a new opportunity to go after that much coveted crown. And things didn't look so bad. They had already taken the step they needed to fight back, and they thought they were ready to make Mercedes fall once and for all in 2018. The conflict resumed at the Albert Park circuit in Australia. After a preseason where Ferrari and Mercedes looked strong again, but this time, in general terms, Ferrari gave more optimism. And did they believe from Italy that it was the season marked on the calendar to return to the top? At the first qualifying test, Mercedes showcased its strength with Lewis Hamilton securing a commanding pole position. A lap over 0.7 seconds faster than Ferrari, which was a huge disappointment for them. Something that gave a boost of confidence to Hamilton, who in the press conference after the classification decided to boast about his magnificent lap.
I used the same mode from Q2 to end of Q3, so there was no extra button, there was no extra mode that I engaged in. What were you doing before that? What were you doing before that? I was waiting to put a good lap in. First, wipe the smile off your face.
With pole position, Hamilton seemed poised to dominate the Grand Prix at will. After the start, he defended his lead against Vettel and Raikkonen, who matched his race pace. But there came a point in the race where Raikkonen seemed a greater threat than Vettel, as the latter was 8 seconds behind his rival. And faced with such a scenario, they decided to stop Hamilton in the pits on lap 19 for his first and only stop of the day. Vettel would stay on track running longer without knowing that the fairy of luck was about to come knocking on his door. The driver, Romain Grosjean, stopped in the pits and had to park the car because a wheel was incorrectly fitted on the single-seater. But that abandonment would end up in a very awkward place, and to remove it they had to declare a virtual safety car. And do you remember who was still on the track after the leader stops? Exactly. And I suppose you also guessed who would go into the pits with the virtual safety car. And when rejoining the track, Vettel has come out as the leader of the Grand Prix, to the disbelief of Hamilton and Mercedes for what had happened, but Hamilton didn't want to give up the victory so easily. Once the virtual retired, he would launch attacks to regain the lead by any means necessary. Hamilton couldn't overtake on a challenging circuit, but he didn't let go either. The 2017 Australian Grand Prix ghosts resurfaced in conditions where a pit stop seemingly jeopardized Hamilton's chances of victory. Mercedes eventually ran out of pace, erasing their smiles. Because when lap 58 arrived, Vettel achieved victory and took home the first 25 points of the year. Even though they had been defeated, this first Grand Prix left the impression that the Germans had the fastest car and were overwhelmingly the favorites. However, this hypothesis was questioned at the next Grand Prix in Bahrain, where Ferrari defeated Mercedes in qualifying. Ferrari takes the top 2 spots on a track that has historically favored them, and where, moreover, Hamilton would have to face a penalty for changing his gearbox, which relegated him from 4th place to 9th. Hamilton appeared more unlikely to win the fight. And would it have to be Bottas who stood up for the Germans in this Grand Prix? And Hamilton, for his part, would have to fight to come back and try to reach as many positions as possible.
Bahrain Grand Prix without problems. Hamilton throws himself in the middle with Fernando behind. He holds his position but can't overtake. Here, yes, they do exterior. Boots ahead of Kim and boots ahead of what we saw, Hash on the outside. Jump attention. Checo Perez in the opposite direction, while Lewis Hamilton rides under a yellow flag in the first sector.
Gradually, he started passing the cars separating him from the podium.
And one.
Once overtaken Pierre Gasly and having moved into 4th position. Would he need a safety car or an alternate strategy to close the gap to the Ferrari and his teammate? Meanwhile, Bottas was closing in on the lead, held by Sebastian Vettel. After the leader stops, Hamilton would stay on track to try to slow down Vettel and give Bottas a chance to get in first. But he couldn't resist for long, and on lap 25, he would overtake him without much trouble. But gradually, Ferrari began to struggle. Two issues led to this. First, Kimi Raikkonen's troubled pit lane caused his withdrawal. Second, Vettel attempted a single-stop strategy. Bottas was close, pressing very hard, giving us a final lap with an exciting battle between Mercedes and Ferrari. However, Vettel would hold his nerve and would leave Bahrain even more of a leader in the World Drivers' Table. The outlook promised an exciting battle. Mercedes had given up 2 victories, and with the point difference that existed in the table, they wanted to avoid a 4th round and another defeat by Ferrari. But once again, the dictators of the Grand Circus would receive another hard blow. Sebastian Vettel secured pole position, beating Valtteri Bottas, the team's top qualifier, by half a second, implying that their intention to come back stronger for 2018 was completely serious. Ferrari aimed to secure another win against their greatest rival, with a larger points difference being ideal.
For now, Beetle matches well with Kimi, corners her a bit. We see how Hamilton is gaining positions, takes the inside. Hamilton, Kimi has problems. Bottas has moved into 2nd. 1.
A poor start from Raikkonen and teammate blocking allowed Bottas to advance. But Hamilton was particularly poorly positioned in 5th place and with the threat of losing position against Daniel Ricciardo. But soon the fight would stabilize. Lewis didn't seem to have many chances to fight for victory under normal conditions, and it would be up to Bottas again to show his mettle for Mercedes and go for the win. And while this was happening, the leaders maintained a relatively close distance, so strategic play was key. And the Silver Arrows decided to call Bottas into the pits on lap 20 to try and undercut against Sebastian Vettel and thus take the lead. Box. And 1 lap later would come the Germans' pit stop. But upon rejoining the track, Mercedes and Bottas had taken the lead from Vente. A crucial strategy, giving the Finn the upper hand to secure his first win of the season. But on this chessboard, it was Ferrari's turn to move their pieces. and they would ask Raikkonen to stay on track to block Bottas as soon as he caught up with him and give Sepp a chance to attack him. And lap 27 was the big opportunity for Vettel, depending on how Kimi Raikkonen moved.
Pay attention there to Kimi, who is getting
attacked from the outside.
Vote, the part is getting ready.
Interior and
Now already!
he has won it.
He has it there. Let's see, it's going to happen. Yes, very close.
He keeps defending himself.
Kimi doesn't have the tires to keep up with him, the fastest. Oh, Kimi, who keeps going, eh? Yes, and look how he left it, eh? How did Sebastian come in so the battle continues, and how close is Sebastian? Careful, eh? Careful on the back straight. Well, be careful before two, eh? Now.
The fast curves are very difficult to navigate closely.
Here we see it. However, Vettel couldn't take advantage of the opportunity and would have to watch how. Bottas pushed him out of drag reduction system range, complicating his mission to recover the Grand Prix victory. But on lap 30, a safety car was deployed to clean the track, after contact between the Toro Rosso drivers, which left debris on the track. A very different race was approaching, and although neither Vettel, Bottas, Lewis nor Raikkonen would stop in the pits again, the two Red Bull men would, who with fresh tires, would be a threat to all the drivers in front of them. Hamilton was third behind Vettel, but the three up front would have to resist the two bulls that were coming eager to gore. And I think never better said. Initially, they would succeed in escaping from them, but soon both bulls went crazy on the asphalt. Verstappen eagerly pursued Hamilton, but made a mistake attempting to overtake him, surrendering his position to his teammate. So Verstappen's turn had been wasted, and now it was Ricciardo's opportunity, who with more patience would achieve the overtaking against the Brit.
And he takes the position from Hamilton and...
Then Verstappen would do the same. Hamilton would fall to the 5th position. But now the threat of the bulls was for Sebastian Vettel, who also couldn't withstand a very smart and aggressive Richard. But when Verstappen was the hunter and it was his turn to try the maneuver, things took a 180-degree turn.
They are very active and they are very fast. Block boots.
And Verstappen gets in and doesn't fit. Is that you, Verstappen? Verstappen has created a significant mess once again.
From where he threw himself, Verstappen has sinned by being extremely optimistic and in an incomprehensible maneuver. He took out the 3rd place, which was precisely Sebastian Vettel, where he ruined the race and where Vettel would have to finish that Grand Prix. With the car completely broken, Sebastian fell to the 6th place, but gradually began to lose positions one after another, first with Hülkenberg, then with Fernando Alonso, and where, miraculously, Carlos Sainz did not end up overtaking him. And he would only manage to finish in 8th position, but Hamilton could only finish 4th without being able to maximize the opportunity that Verstappen's strike gave him. In fact, at this point, an atypical Hamilton was shown, without much rhythm and without having many opportunities. His teammate had beaten him in 2 of the year's first 3 races. Following the tone of past years, the Baku Street Circuit should be totally for Mercedes because of that power in its engine. But once again, they would be surprised by a Vettel, who had snatched the pole from both Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. In a surprise move that showed his excellent spirits, the German, seeking his 3rd win to widen the gap between himself and his rivals, delighted everyone, between him and all his pursuers. And during the course of the race, Ferrari and its driver would control it for most of the time. On lap 32, they decide to pit, but Valtteri Bottas and Hamilton stay on track a bit longer. An undercut that Ferrari had set up, and that was working because when the 2 front drivers stopped, it would take the lead again. The plan was for him to lead until the end and take home the 25 points for the win. An apparent flawless plan with the only peculiarity that they did not take into account the Kill Your Teammate festival that Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo had set up, who were fighting as if they were playing for the driver's title in that race. And with that level of aggression, it was only a matter of time before the worst happened.
RS will indeed be able to get closer to Max. Look, Look, Verstappen, as we tick-tock down the straight.
RS for Daniel Ricciardo, who is not going to think so much. This time he is going to try. He throws himself from very far away. He deceives him on the inside, on the outside. He touches.
Daniel Ricciardo crashes into Max Verstappen, causing drama on the racetrack.
It had been seen coming. We all could predict the future at that moment. The two Red Bull drivers collided, and this collision had caused the need for a safety car. And Valtteri Bottas, who had not stopped, would he take advantage of the neutralization? And upon rejoining, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix had a new candidate for victory. When the race restarted, only 4 laps remained until the end of the Grand Prix, and Vettel wanted the victory. He would have very few opportunities, and many other drivers would have played it safe at that moment. But he decides to be aggressive and ruins all his chances in a single move. Vettel tried to overtake them, braking from a long way back, but the maneuver goes wrong. He only manages to lose position to Hamilton and Raikkonen, destroying his tires in the process. He threw the race away. This seemed like a gift for Mercedes, but in reality, it would benefit Lewis Hamilton. Because a lap later, Bottas would puncture by touching debris that was on the track. Lewis Hamilton would inherit the lead and the victory of the Grand Prix against a Bottas who, with that deflating tire, would also cause him to fall in the rankings. And against a Vettel who would end up 4th behind Sergio Perez and his teammate. A single botched maneuver led to severe consequences. Because Vettel lost the victory, the podium, and even the lead in the World Drivers' Table. Following the season's wild start, the Spanish, Monaco, Canadian, and French Grand Prix were held, where Vettel, Hamilton, and other competitors started earning points that season. After the French Grand Prix at the Paul Ricard circuit, Hamilton held a 14-point lead over Vettel. The repetition of the 2017 battle was before us. Despite the British and Mercedes leading both tables, Ferrari was expected to bring a major upgrade package to the British Grand Prix, allowing them to outperform Mercedes. But before that key moment of the season, the candidates would have to face each other at the Red Bull Ring. The Bull circuit that once again witnessed a strengthened Mercedes in the need to score points, given the possibility that Ferrari could turn the World Championship around with the performance of those new improvements that were coming. Sebastian Vettel faces a grid penalty for blocking Carlos Sainz during his Q2 qualifying attempt. Therefore, despite finishing in 3rd position in that classification, it would turn into an 8th place, and with the Mercedes in the top positions. If we had a calm race, this would be a walk in the park for the Germans. But we already know what Formula 1 is about, and things don't always go as the teams would like. Hamilton capitalized on Bottas' poor performance to take the lead. From there, he controlled the race's pace, keeping his teammate in check and denying opportunities to nearly everyone. But the first wake-up call came on lap 14 when Bottas had to abandon the Grand Prix due to a reliability issue. But as they say, if something can go wrong, it can eventually get worse. And with Valtteri Bottas' withdrawal, a virtual safety car was deployed to remove the finish car. A virtual that many drivers would use to make their respective pit stop. Except for the Mercedes team and Lewis Hamilton, who would stay on track and decide not to make their stop at that time. This greatly benefited Mercedes, as Ferrari and Red Bull made their timely pit stop. When the British driver stopped under green flag, he lost the position. After the race restart, Hamilton attempted to extend his lead but only managed to maintain it until the lap 26 before making his pit stop. Eventually, the forecast came true. He lost position to Verstappen and Raikkonen, and his lead in what seemed to be a walk towards victory turned in one fell swoop into a 3rd place. And besides, Vettel was 4th and right behind Lewis Hamilton, who had smelled blood and was ready to attack as soon as the Briton gave him the opportunity. Hamilton kept Vettel at bay for a few laps. until lap 39. Vettel sees the gap and, without hesitation, goes for his rival's position. By this point, things were already pretty bad for Hamilton and company. They were struggling with the tires and Vettel had overtaken them on the track. From that point forward, it appeared their sole choice was to mitigate the harm. Because of the excessive wear they were experiencing with the tires, they were not going to be able to achieve a better result than that 4th position they had. Until on lap 64, drama would appear again in the Mercedes box. Due to a fuel pressure failure, with 7 laps to finish that ordeal, Hamilton would have to retire. And with the 3rd place that Vettel would get at the end of the Grand Prix, he would take the lead in the World Drivers' Table again. And it was getting closer to the date set in the calendar for the big update, with which Ferrari could beat Mercedes. Silverstone has always been the home of the Germans, ever since Hamilton became their driver, and where they had managed to win uninterruptedly since 2013 without faltering. But this time, they were afraid that Ferrari would surpass them with that aggressive upgrade package. But as I told you in the last chapter, at home, Hamilton thrives and they would come to prove their point in the classification. With a very tight pole position in less than a tenth, Hamilton made the first strike. But if you've seen the other chapters of legendary rivalries, you know that a pole position means nothing if you don't get the best result on Sunday. Ferrari and Vettel knew this well and were ready to give their all to win at their rival's home track.
Of Great Britain, defend the pole. Lewis Hamilton, come on. As the British know with all the public.
Vettel overtook Hamilton, who had a slow start. And if things looked bad at this point, they would get much worse in a moment. Raikkonen overshot the braking and hit Lewis Hamilton, who watched as the other drivers passed him, and where if they wanted to at least finish on the podium, they would have to hope for some kind of miracle to appear. Vettel needed to win after Raikkonen and Lewis Hamilton's collision to extend his lead heading into his home Grand Prix in hockey. Bottas would have to be the one to try to stop the German once again. For now, this would only be a duel between the two, because Raikkonen would get a 10-second penalty for causing a collision, and Hamilton would have to recover from the back, and that would take him quite some time. But, as expected, he started to climb as fast as he could, overtaking rivals one after another and trying to make that miracle appear. But as was also expected, Sebastian would control the race, trying never to give Bottas a chance to attack with the drag reduction system. So the race at the front stabilized quite a bit. On lap 32, Marcus Ericsson had a hard hit, forcing a safety car to be deployed. Ferrari took advantage of the neutralization to pit Vettel and Raikkonen for a set of white tires each. But Mercedes would decide that it was not necessary to make the stop and they would stay on track, trusting that their hard tires would be enough to be able to beat Ferrari. Vettel would lose position to Bottas and Raikkonen to Hamilton, leaving the latter third and just behind his rival, but with tires in worse condition. However, even though the race would be restarted, it was brief. This was due to the fact that it ended on the same lap it started. The safety car, Carlos Sainz and Romain Grosjean collided, necessitating another safety car deployment. This suited Mercedes well, as they could avoid excessive tire wear. But Vettel wanted the victory, and the moment the safety car left, he would go to annihilate the rival at home. During the initial stages, Bottas would defend quite well, but he would have to achieve the feat of stopping his rivals for a span of 10 laps. And Vettel hit and hit, hoping to knock down the Finn, who still wouldn't give in. A thrilling battle between Ferrari and Mercedes, with Vettel and Bottas vying for first, and Hamilton and Raikkonen for third on the podium. Until lap 47 comes, Vettel sees an opportunity and makes a go-for-broke move for the victory. With 4 laps remaining, Bottas yielded to a relentless Vettel, who persistently pursued the lead. And after this, the fin would collapse and end up falling to the 4th position behind Kimi Räikkönen. Hamilton also had an excellent race, climbing to 2nd place. But Sepp had managed to strike at home where it hurts the most, and he left as a stronger leader, heading to the Grand Prix of his nation, the German Grand Prix. And on the podium we saw two completely different faces, a happy Vettel celebrating the victory, but a furious Lewis Hamilton. He had achieved an epic comeback and held up well with his tires, but he was still annoyed by that incident. On lap number 1, where he did not hesitate to point out that there had been interesting tactics on the part of Ferrari.
But I sense when you got out of the car, you were still pretty unhappy.
My team did an amazing job this weekend, and we've got so much support. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on us all. Tactics, I would say, from their side.
Räikkönen took responsibility for his error and accepted the penalty, denying accusations that it was intentional, and stating that such incidents can occur in races. But the damage was already done. Ferrari and Vettel headed to Germany, the 4-time champion's home, aiming to extend his lead further. A Grand Prix where racers maintain a good pace and Mercedes continues to struggle. The video below is from the German Grand Prix qualifying round. And who are they seeing on screen? It's Lewis Hamilton, who, due to another reliability issue, couldn't continue his journey and would have to settle for starting from the 14th position. That Grand Prix? And this was painful for the Silver Arrows, but even more painful was watching Vettel snatch the pole position from Valtteri Bottas. And where would he start on Sunday in the best position? The faces of Ferrari and Vettel were of satisfaction, and those of Mercedes were of frustration. We were facing a rampant horse that had everything to go more leader than ever to the last races of the World Championship. Unaware that after this Grand Prix, one of these two title contenders would never be the same again. The feast was readied for Ferrari to devour. Their top rival had stumbled in the standings. With Sebastian Vettel, they had everything to leave Germany with a significant advantage in their favor. However, Hamilton refused to give up, believing he could turn the race around. Because in his mind there was only one phrase that was burned into his consciousness. I will achieve it, because I know it's not impossible. Only one could emerge victorious from Hockenheim, and the circuit, along with the weather, was about to give us a race that none would forget.
It has gone well. Sebastian blocks the way. Valtteri Bottas is moving to the right side, trying to gain position. Kimi has also defended well against the attack of...
Mead started strong, not allowing his rivals to take the lead in his homeland. Hamilton was more cautious. Despite the poor start, he knew his car would allow him to overtake rivals one by one. And that's exactly what would happen. Within a span of 4 laps, he was already in 10th position, while Vettel comfortably controlled the Grand Prix. And by lap 22, Hamilton was already 5th. But clearly, he would require outside assistance to get nearer to the podium spots or even compete for the win. The external help would manifest to him as rain. Because over the last 30 laps, the sky was getting darker and the possibility of seeing water was becoming more present. And while by this lap, almost all the drivers had already made their pit stop, Hamilton was among the leading drivers, the only one who had not made a pit stop.
What if the water came?
The Brit could make a single stop and, strategically, could get back into the fight for victory or the podium. But the laps went by and the rain didn't end up falling on the circuit. Seeing that the sky was not cooperating, Mercedes would decide to put their driver in the pits at the end of lap 43 so that he could mount ultra-soft tires to attack at the end and recover as many positions as possible. But just at the moment he leaves the pits, the rain had arrived. It seemed that Mercedes had made a huge mistake, but they weren't entirely wrong. Because the track wasn't getting wet enough to mount intermediate tires, but it was very slippery. Under those conditions, softer tires are easier to maintain temperature and prevent skidding. and Hamilton had precisely that advantage over all his rivals, who started to suffer quite a bit. Staying calm, keeping cool, and not panicking was essential at those moments. But Lewis was flying in those conditions, taking a lot of time off all his rivals and becoming a serious threat. It was clear that with the slippery floor and the small amount of water falling, everyone was suffering in those conditions. But as I said, staying calm was crucial. And in lap 52, one of these drivers wouldn't understand it and would shock the Formula One world instantly.
Yes, but well, it's spinning. Vettel, he's also doing very well. Vettel is running just like Hamilton. That is, they are showing off here, also demonstrating their skills. Accident.
Vettel
accident.
He goes off the track. He has lost control and he has lost the race. Oh my, some are getting up to celebrate it. Hands on heads at Ferrari. Attention!
To the mess in the rain. At turn 13 in the stadium.
Safety car, their safety car.
The leader of the Grand Prix, who was comfortably ahead by 10 seconds and set to win his home Grand Prix. He made a grave error that eliminated him from the race, one that will likely haunt him for life. The conditions were difficult, and Vettel would be the one who would have to pay the red plates. The worst part is his mistake forced a safety car deployment, which would greatly benefit Lewis Hamilton, because his rivals would pit while he stayed on track to lead. He was in top form. It looked like a win in a seemingly lost Grand Prix, but he needed to hold on for a few more laps. The onslaught of a Bottas who saw victory as a possibility. Bottas attacked eagerly. Mercedes realized if they allowed this fight, they could potentially leave a secured Grand Prix without any points. So they would order Bottas to desist from the attack, being a clear team order to safeguard the result they had obtained. And when lap 67 arrived, he achieved it because he knew it was not impossible. Lewis Hamilton won the race from 14th position, and with that, he regained the lead in the World Drivers' Table at his great rival's home. However, Mercedes and Hamilton were not exempt from problems because the latter would be investigated by the track stewards. During the safety car, he was ordered to enter the pits, but his team then told him not to, resulting in him exiting through the escape route. The action violated Appendix 50 of Chapter 4 in the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile et Sporting Regulations, where it states that no driver can cross the line separating the pit lane entrance and the track, except in cases of force majeure, and where such investigation seriously endangered his victory. However, penalties for these actions can range from a reprimand to a time penalty. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile only reprimanded the driver, deeming he didn't endanger others. Mercedes accepted responsibility for the incident. They also viewed the chaotic context around the situation as favorable to him, achieving with this to maintain the victory and with it the valuable 25 points that this corresponds to. In the following races, Hamilton won in Hungary, but Vettel responded with a victory in Belgium. And despite the mistake made in his home Grand Prix, the fight for the title was still a reality. And with the new power that his engine had displayed and the fast car they had at their disposal shown in the Belgian Grand Prix, they faced the hunting Grand Prix at the Monza International Autodrome circuit, with the confidence to finally end the prancing horse's drought of victories on its hunting circuit. And with that, deduct quite a few points in the fight for the title. Considering this, Ferrari would secure a historic 1-2 finish. But would it be Kimi Raikkonen who would get the best spot to see the traffic light at the moment the race starts? Anyone would think that in the situation the championship was in, Vettel would receive the first place from his teammate at some point in the race. But the German himself acknowledged to the media that the Finn would have the opportunity to fight for the victory. And with the Ferrari fired up in front of its home crowd, they would be looking for that 1-2 they urgently needed. But they couldn't underestimate Mercedes because they weren't going to hand them the victory wrapped in gift paper. Indeed, Raikkonen would defend himself from his teammate's attack, as Vettel had previously warned. Despite the attack, Ferrari managed to maintain first place after the grid change. But this fight had paved the way for a more aggressive Hamilton who would not hesitate to attack Vettel. And where the two would enter in parallel to the La Roya variant, two cars hardly enter Roya in parallel. Hamilton spectacularly overtook Vettel, who got the worst of the maneuver. He ended up spun out and at the back of the pack with his front wing broken. He reprimanded his rival over the radio for not leaving him space during the maneuver. Despite an investigation, the stewards ruled it a racing incident requiring no penalties. With Vettel out, Hamilton only needed to pass Raikkonen to lead the race. But Kimi wasn't going to give up that easily, and despite losing position to Hamilton at some point, he would immediately regain it afterwards. Ferrari and Kimi couldn't let Hamilton win that Grand Prix at all costs. Vettel would have to try to gain as many positions as possible, or relive the memories from 2017. But the race is quite long, and anything could happen. Mercedes didn't want Hamilton to take unnecessary risks, considering his current position and where Sebastian Vettel was. So instead of risking taking the position on track, they would execute a strategy with which they could definitively put the horse to sleep at home. Why did they feint a pit stop and Ferrari out of fear of an undercut? They would call Kimi Raikkonen to stop, and that would be a serious mistake they would pay for much later, as Hamilton would not stop immediately. But Mercedes had realized that if they extended their driver's stop, towards the end of the race, Raikkonen's tires would fall off and they could easily take the lead. Therefore, they would call Hamilton to stop 8 laps later, falling 4 seconds behind Raikkonen by lap 41. The Brit was in attack mode, ready to snatch the victory from Kimi Raikkonen, who would defend himself, trying to hold on to the win at Maranello's home. Until Hamilton activates hammer time and says goodbye to Kimi Raikkonen, easily overtaking him. The strategy worked perfectly. Hamilton took the lead, and at the rivals' home, he hit them quite hard in the charge. And after the checkered flag fell, Hamilton won on foreign soil. He avenged what happened in Silverstone and was heading towards a new title that smelled like a World Penta Championship. This World Cup was becoming a real-life version of the nightmares from 2017. But here, there would be no reliability to blame. Here, Vettel and Ferrari were the ones failing, although there was still a way to recover. Only 17 points separated both in the drivers' table, and only by 15 points Mercedes led the constructors' table. The World Championship remained undecided. Singapore was a track that traditionally didn't favor Mercedes. Once again, like last year, it was a golden opportunity for Ferrari to recover points, if they didn't repeat the errors from 2017. But in the background, you could hear Lewis Hamilton saying, "Not on my damn watch." On a circuit that historically was a headache for Mercedes, Hamilton had taken pole position and Vettel had only managed to finish in 3rd position. To the Germans' dismay, the British finished the race, leaving no opportunities for others. And with this victory, extending the lead in the drivers' table to the
40 points.
The next Grand Prix of the season would be at the Russia circuit, where we go from a circuit that had always been a headache for Mercedes to a place that had always been German territory. The Sochi circuit, where Mercedes hadn't let go of the victory since the year 2014 and where they had historically never been defeated. A less than favorable outlook for Ferrari, but where they would have to win because the hourglass was running out. With few bullets left in the chamber, they had to make each one count or risk losing the World Cup once more. As expected, Mercedes would manage to take pole position and Ferrari and Vettel could only finish in 3rd place. But here this was not particularly bad because precisely on this Sochi circuit, the pole position is a disadvantage and not an advantage. This is due to the powerful suction provided from the starting box to curve number 1, so anything could happen at the start. Mercedes blocked Vettel's attempts on the branch. They defended the 1-2 well, so Ferrari would have to strategically seek victory to win. During the initial laps of the Grand Prix, the race was quite stable. Bottas was leading the Grand Prix, Hamilton was behind him, and Vettel couldn't get too aggressively close to the rivals. On lap 12, Mercedes would start to move the race, because on that lap they would stop Valtteri and Bottas in the pits, trying to protect themselves from any undercut attempt by the rivals. And precisely 1 lap after Valtteri Bottas stopped, Ferrari would call Sebastian Vettel into the pits to undercut Lewis Hamilton and try to snatch second place from him. A strategy that would work perfectly, because when he stopped a lap later, he would come out right behind the German. Mercedes lost the lead with Lewis, but they knew they were fast and would urge him to try to regain the position on track. A couple of laps later, Hamilton, sticking to Vettel, attempted the overtaking maneuver. Peter had blocked his way on the first attempt. Hamilton emerges well from the first turn and overtakes his rival with a daring maneuver on the outside of Sochi's fast bend. A maneuver that was not just any overtaking. It was a real checkmate for Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel. From this point onward, the two silver cars would control the race, but the Germans wanted to maximize the harvest. They aimed to conclude the World Cup swiftly. They would order Valtteri Bottas in first position to give up his position to Lewis Hamilton so he could score more points than Sebastian Vettel. Valtteri Bottas would reluctantly obey this. The move was harshly criticized by fans. They deemed it unnecessary, considering Hamilton was ahead of Vettel with a substantial lead in the World Drivers' Championship. However, Mercedes defended the decision, saying it was necessary to secure the World Championship quickly. And with the victory of Lewis Hamilton and the third place of Sebastian Vettel, it was 10 more points that extended Lewis Hamilton's lead to 50 points difference. Things were already looking very bad for Ferrari, and Vettel, making up 50 points with only 5 races to the end, seemed like an impossible mission, but Ferrari did not want to give up. They had already realized this chapter was titled The Self-Destruction of a 4-Time World Champion. So, that title isn't solely due to Germany and Italy, believe me. Because from Japan onwards, Vettel would take care of destroying the few opportunities he had left.
Has part of the barbels been lost?
Yes, he has lost the barbels of the...
Vettel, he had a setback there, another touch behind. There was another touch, I think, of forcing. Careful, he touches. Vettel is... touches and...
Spins out. It can't be. He has made a mistake again.
There we see it. Was something happening to him or inside his head? But it was incredible that in 8 races he had made 3 mistakes that deprived him of scoring more points than his rivals. It was evident that the German was under a lot of pressure. Even from Italy, the Tifosi started turning their backs on him and blaming him for what happened in 2018. The Italian press was tearing him apart, and even former team staff were pointing fingers at him. For instance, Luca Di Montesemolo, former Ferrari president, told the media Hamilton would have won driving this Ferrari. And all this accumulation of situations seems to have weakened his morale, destroyed his confidence, and with it, little by little, began to destroy his title options. For the Grand Prix of Mexico, the difference was 70 points, already in favor of Lewis Hamilton, and the latter only needed to finish 7th. The 5th championship would be his. Vettel would need a miracle more than ever in his career to become champion. He needed to win all the remaining races, and for Hamilton not to score 5 more points, neither a 2nd nor a 3rd place would be enough. He had to win with Hamilton outside the top 7. Or would this World Championship be decided in the same place as it was in 2017 and starting? From 4th place, things looked complicated with Luis III, but fate would decide. And the Mexico Grand Prix could again be the place of the British man's coronation.
Hamilton.
Hamilton made a good extension, overtaking Ricciardo for second place, leaving his rival behind. Wanting to avoid something similar to last season, although Vettel would manage to defend fourth place. All he could do was await the miracle at the former Autodromo della Magdalena Miciuca. But during the race, Max was winning at will, and Vettel needed that first place he had in Dutch if he wanted to keep the dream alive. A small hope opened up when Hamilton began to struggle with his tires, which were wearing out on the asphalt. Vettel and Ferrari would realize this and quickly launch an attack against Lewis. And on lap 40, Vettel managed to overtake and get rid of Lewis Hamilton, but he was neither in first place nor was Hamilton in seventh. The Mercedes continued to fall behind and was later passed by Daniel Ricciardo and Kimi Raikkonen. But even so, having dropped back 3 positions, that place was enough for him to be world champion. Despite Vettel's efforts to prolong the definition of this World Cup, it eventually became virtually impossible. Between reliability errors, strategic mistakes, and lack of development. In those last races, they had once again conceded a World Cup victory on a red carpet. After Silverstone, it seemed Ferrari would fight to the end in the World Cup. But as in 2017, they would take care of destroying all their opportunities, and Hamilton, after a complicated start and some misfortunes in the process, they were about to culminate in checkmate. A season where they were unable to surrender. Where the British tried to improve every day, and where he was mentally strong enough to overcome Austria's abandonment, Silverstone's blow, and Germany's classification. And with the support of a precision machine like Mercedes, he was about to achieve the milestone that Sebastian Vettel was about to miss. The Serpenta, world champion of the Grand Circus. And when the 71st lap arrived, Mexico saw the end of its Grand Prix and the coronation of a new 5-time world champion of Formula One named Lewis Hamilton.
We'll do a few burn-ups as well. They've got a special world champion.
Ferrari had arrived in Mexico really without much hope, but it was still painful, as for the second consecutive year. They allowed the crown to oppose the big circus dictator. In their hands, they had the possibility to end this authoritarian government, and in their hands will weigh the being the architect of their own self-destructions. Mercedes demonstrated why they had been the dominant force since 2014, proving you should never count them out. Even though Ferrari might have had the fastest car at some point in the season, did they manage to come out ahead to once again win both world crowns of the Grand Circus? The rivalry between Vettel and Hamilton had an excellent development, but unfortunately a terrible ending in terms of spectacle. And this can only be blamed on one side, the red one. Because during both seasons they had entertaining confrontations, electrifying battles. But it was they who on 2 occasions let down the millions of fans around the world. A rivalry that could have been one of the best in history if Ferrari and Vettel hadn't failed. And unfortunately, from this moment on, the paths of both contenders would be completely different. Lewis Hamilton achieved a milestone only previously accomplished by Schumacher, matching Fangio with 5 world titles, where he would also win in 2019 and 2020. Not only surpassing Juan Manuel Fangio in titles, but also matching Michael Schumacher and becoming statistically the most successful Formula One driver in history. Continuing to break records one after another until reaching the 2021 season, whose story is a completely different tale. And while Lewis Hamilton's path was a constant light, Vettel's would gradually become more darkness. Because from 2019 he would never again compete for a Formula One world title. He would still battle with Lewis Hamilton that season, but couldn't take the crown from them. And unfortunately, after this 2018 campaign, Vettel continued to make one mistake after another, showing promise in some Grand Prix and in others, unfortunately, not so much. And his stay at Ferrari wouldn't last much longer either, as in 2019, he would be beaten by his teammate Charles Leclerc. The strained relationship between him and Mattia Binotto meant that even before 2020 began, it was clear their partnership would end. For 2021, Vettel's final Grand Prix victory came in 2019. After departing Ferrari, he joined the Aston Martin team, with the promise of being the leader of a team that would eventually fight for victories in the future. But he spent 2021 with a less competitive car, and 2022 would be more of the same story that would cause Vettel to announce his retirement from the world of Formula One in June of this same ongoing season. Concluding a career in the pinnacle of motorsports, and to a rivalry that began in the year 2010, a rivalry that meant the expected direct confrontation of those who arrived in the category in 2007. And 10 years later, they gave us two exciting world championships with intensity, illusion, and making the fans jump. A rivalry that we could define as the expected showdown between two great champions, with a totally amazing and incredible development, but an ending that could have been 1,000 times better. But this is where I ask you, what did you think of the duels between Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton? Not only during the 2017 and 2018 seasons, but from their beginnings in Formula One? What did you think of this rivalry? And what did you think of the confrontations they had on track? Let me know all your opinions in the comments section. Believe me, I will be delighted to read each and every one of you. As I had already mentioned, Legendary Rivalries is in its final phase. Only 2 more chapters remain, and the next one will premiere until next year. But don't worry, new projects are coming that I think will be good enough, so you won't miss Legendary Rivalries for a long time. But if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so you know when I'm uploading a new video, and share this with your friends. I also invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter accounts. The links are in the video description. And see you in the next episode of Legendary Formula One Rivalries. Thank you for tuning in, and see you later. Thank you. Thank you for watching the video.